Hello everybody, I hope you're having a peaceful and harmonious day, whatever you are. I wanted to talk about the concept of magic today because there is a beautiful understanding that comes out of this non-dual understanding of reality. And the word magic is something that in our society, in our conventional way to see the world, can be a little misleading, or if anything, it could be interesting to understand why do we see magic the way we do. And I can imagine already that your thoughts, your mind, when they hear the word magic, they already fantasize about something extraordinary, right? It goes into that point of, wow, something that is beyond the senses, something that is beyond regular or mundane workings of life, and some extraordinary achievement. But at the end of this video, I will show you why true magic is not really something extraordinary. And I hope to make the point clear so you can also see the beauty of understanding the world the way we see it from a non-dual perspective, as opposed to the limited view which creates the so-called magic that we see as extraordinary. So the first point that we need to get through is that we are used to seeing the world from a perspective of separation. This is almost like a natural tendency that we have based on how we see the world, because we see the world through perceptions, and these perceptions create the convincing notion that we live in a world that is separated by space, and all the things are objects outside of myself. So from this perspective, we see a world that is made out of things, and these things have their own existence and reality, and we are, as it were, just visitors in this world. There is no apparent or clear connection between all these things and, of course, ourselves. So when we hear about some things that are in reality that go beyond what we believe, that these ways of creating things exist. For example, somebody who can have some sort of psychic power, or even a material feat that can go beyond what we understand as the workings of reality. So somebody, for example, we hear about bending metal from a distance, or being able to move things with their minds, or shape things with minimal effort, and so on. These things we often, especially as children, we see it as fantastic. It's something that I cannot do, and so a few people are able to do this. Another example is, of course, those psychic powers that are mentally, the capacity of being able to travel or to do things in the etheric world, or the mental or metaphysical world, the astral planes, and so forth. These things are considered magic from a different perspective, which is the perspective of separation, the perspective of me being a body and a mind secluded in a world of things. And that's because reality behaves in a very consistent way. What we know as the world is very consistent, and so we call this laws of nature. The laws of nature are unbreakable, right? We cannot defy gravity, we cannot defy molecular binding, and we do this with what we call work at a distance, right? So we work things and we shape things with our hands, with our tools, and so it's inconceivable that we can do this with the mind. And that's why when these things are reported, we see it as magic, because they are shaping reality in a way that we normally can't. And so they seem to have superpowers. But you see, this is from the perspective that I am a separate being, that I am an object in a world of things. And when we perceive it this way, then of course it looks like magic. Anything that defies the structure of reality, anything that goes beyond the laws of nature as we understand them, of course, because we think that these laws are set and that they cannot be bent. But when that happens, then we say there's something magically happening here. You see? So it all depends on the perspective, and we're approaching it from the view of I, a separate being, observe the world, I qualify the world as being made out of objects, me being one of them, and there is a separation, there is no connection between things. And so we see magic from that point of view. And also, I have to say that in certain perspectives which are deemed to be spiritual, for example, the idea that I understand metaphysics and I know that everything is connected and so forth, there is still the sense that these feats are magical, that these things are superpowers or psychic powers, because they are beyond what I am. You see, implicitly in this understanding of metaphysics and the astral world and so on, it is still considered a superpower. It is still considered something that is beyond what I am. See, there is still implicit a sense of separation here, only that we try to convince ourselves that it is a lot more normal than we think, that these things are possible. And this is fine in a way of expanding our awareness to the fact that no, things are not set, everything is created out of mind, but there is still a presence there that says, well, we are limited in this form, right? We're buying into the beginning stage of the convincing perception that reality is made out of separate parts. So that's what I want you to notice, that in whatever thought that we have, it doesn't matter how informed we may be in terms of metaphysics or science or new advancements in physics and so on, it doesn't matter how we see it. It really depends on our perspective of the world and how we conceive ourselves to be. And so when we, at any rate, we consider or begin with the sense of separation, me being a discrete entity and other things being just a playful of other things, then of course there's going to be a sense of magical happenings. These are superpowers, like I said, something that I am not able to achieve. You see, you're referring to yourself as a separate being. I cannot do this, other people can do this. As long as there is this sense of identity as an object, as an entity, everything will seem magical from the perspective of things defying the laws of nature. See, and they seem extraordinary because we're buying into the world as being essentially separate. And so when there are these flashes in experience that show that there are connectiveness, or reality is a lot more malleable, you can mold it with just the power of thought, for example, then that would seem magical. But the starting point is always that there is a sense of separation, that I am this discrete being or entity. So magic from this point of view will always be that which defies the ordinary, and so it seems extraordinary. If I'm not beating a dead horse at this point, I just want to summarize that in any case in which we see ourselves, we identify ourselves as a separate being. It doesn't matter if it's a human, a soul, or a magical entity, or whatever it is. As long as we are seeing ourselves objectively, physically or mentally, things that defy the laws of nature, which they're not really laws of nature, they're just patterns of behavior. And those patterns of behavior, like I said, are very constant in our reality, this reality as we perceive it. All these things are constant. That's why we call them, constants of physics. And yet they seem to break, ever so softly and small, but they do change. For example, even the speed of light is not a constant, and that's a whole different topic, but that is the truth. The speed of light is not constant, it varies. Very small variations, but it varies. And so when these things happen and we perceive them this way, then we say, oh, that's magic. Magic is happening. But what happens when you change your point of view, your perspective? The only other option is that you recognize that what you fundamentally are is not a separate being, is not a separate entity. This is the death of the ego, because the ego can only exist in the strong association of ourselves with, admittedly, the very convincing perceptions that lend the idea that this is a world made out of separate things, me being one of them. So when we do the investigation into the nature of ourselves, and we actually see that what we fundamentally are is this pure awareness which has no objective quality. It is devoid of form. It is the formless, or the void. The void, sunyata, as we call it in Hindu language or Sanskrit. And so when we begin to see ourselves as this, and we understand that everything is coming out of this, of ourselves, then it is impossible to see separation, because everything is contained within this which we call self, God, awareness, or me, I. Whatever the thought I comes from, that which emanates the I thought, that is precisely the one basis of all reality. And it is totally understandable at the beginning to say it is a unified self, but in fact there is no need to even call it unified. It just is. Unification means that there are parts of it that are joined together, but that's not really even the case. What we see is just one indivisible whole. And as we allow ourselves to understand this, not believe it, because belief is just another shape in the mind, it's another form in the mind. But when we begin to commune with this, when we begin to bring our attention back into this realization, that's why we call it self-realization, and we begin to go back and back into it, we begin to see that everything is coming out of this, which I am, and you are, and everything is. This recognition is what brings an understanding of reality, how it really works. The laws of nature as we perceive them are simply patterns, very consistent patterns that behave in a constant way, or perceivably constant. But look at it from this perspective, because we're so used to reality behaving constant in its patterns, we call it the ordinary, right? This is the ordinary world. But what about when you have a dream, and you're dreaming, and you have this sense that you're looking at somebody that you know, but their face is completely different, and yet you behave like nothing wrong is happening. There's nothing off about this interaction. I know that you are you, although you may not even have a human shape. In dreams, we behave as if everything is normal. We don't even question the fact that we may be interacting with somebody who is dead, or that they have a mature interaction with you and they're being represented by a little kid. So these things are all normal in the dream state. And the reason why this happens is because our mind is totally understanding, in total understanding of its own workings, of its own patterns. It doesn't recognize them as off, because that's part of the dream state. Our mind is coherent in itself. Now, something curious happens when the ego gets into the dream. When the sense of myself in this ordinary world gets into the dream, then it starts to see inconsistencies. Sometimes it could be a little scary, the experience, and other times it could be a lucid dream. That's where the ego self is getting into the dream and saying, I, a limited being, am able to shape this dream in any way I want. You see? So it's only when this sense of separation gets in there that we start to see inconsistencies, and so we call that magic. That's why we all love lucid dreams, because this ego self is able to be in an environment in which the patterns of behavior of the world can be shaped by simple thoughts. Now, why am I bringing all of this into the question? It's because if you see that dreams are this type of behavior, then you can go back into the nature of your being and see that everything is behaving like a dream. In other words, this reality is a dream. It's just that it's a lot more consistent in its patterns and behaviors than the dream state. However, it is not infallible. It is not completely solid. And so these things are just bound to happen. These anomalies, we could call it, anomalies to the consistency of the patterns and behaviors of energy, or what we call matter. So these interactions, we see them as magic from the point of view of the separate self, but from the point of view of the pure absolute self, this is not magic. This is simply the inconsistency and impermanence of the world showing itself through connection. Because everything is, again, we can legitimately say that it is connected, that it's not separate from the point of view of the separate self. And so we can say it is connected, but in fact it is just a self-generated reality. Who is generating it? You. Who else? You see, from this point of view, the ordinary world is the magic. This, that we are able to consistently create a reality, and I mean not create with conscious thoughts, but unconsciously we are creating this. And it's not me or I, the ego self, but rather I, awareness, am able to create this. And so I am in a dream. And it is wonderful to be in this dream. It is amazing to just be. So you see the shift that is happening here. From feeling limited, a separate self, and thinking that these so-called anomalies are happening, and I call those things magic because they are extraordinary, beyond the ordinary, paranormal, we say. All these terms are based on a solid belief. And I say a solid belief because it feels solid, but a belief of separation. And so they would seem magical in juxtaposition with who I feel I am, which I am limited. I have no power over the world, and there are other powers. However, when you shift your attention into the nature of yourself, pure awareness, the absolute self, then the movement of a bird, or the sound of somebody's voice, or simply the feeling of the earth, the wind, everything is magic because it is being self-generated, and it is a very consistent pattern that allows us to have a consistent experience. All this to say that magic is simply the world That's why we call it in Hinduism Maya. Its root for magic is the same, Maya and magic. This is the illusion not as a deceit or a false perception. Although we could say that if I am investing myself in the separate self, then I'm investing myself in self-deception or illusion. I am not that. I am that which perceives the magic. I am that who perceives the world as magic. So everything else is a play of these interactions. This is the magic that happens naturally as you connect with yourself, with your true self, and you begin to see without effort and appreciate life for what it is. It's a happening inside of me or made out of me, not separate. And it's definitely not extraordinary that these so-called anomalies happen. They're just part of the flashings of the workings of reality saying, hey, this is all connected. This is all one thing. And that is the essence of living from this beautiful understanding of who you truly are. I hope this enlightened a little bit your day, and I find that it is just beautiful to view things that we considered in the past to be in a certain way, and now we can see it from a different way because we are awakening to our true nature and we're beginning to discern truth from false. And from truth, we always find this peaceful and joyful relationship with the world. And that's what I'm all about. So I hope this gave you that little bit of joy and peace and just connectiveness with everything else, because that's what we yearn for. I have nothing else to share but to remind you that this understanding is not a complicated one. This understanding is actually the simplest thing you can embark on, but it is an infinite unfolding of what this understanding does to you and your life. So I would invite you to just continue to do it if you have a particular practice. And if not, I would invite you to go to our Telegram group, which we have been pretty active on with Zoom calls and so on, to reinforce this understanding. You can find the link in the description. With that being said, I wish you a wonderful day, beautiful life, and I'll see you in the next video.